Okay, have you ever heard of a lake that floats? I'm not talking about the water, but the actual ground on its surface. Well, deep in northeast India, there is this place of almost magical beauty, a world of floating islands that people live on, that supports a national park and an entire way of life. So let's dive into this incredible and, as we'll see, deeply troubled floating world. So, what's the secret here? It's something called a phumdi. The best way to think of it is like a natural living raft. It's this dense, tangled mat of plants and soil and all sorts of organic stuff. But what's really wild is that most of its mass, we're talking over 80%, is actually hidden underwater. That's what makes it float. And these aren't just, small patches of grass. People have built their homes on these phumdis. They've created entire villages that just drift on the lake surface. They're living their lives quite literally afloat, a whole community just bobbing on the water for generations. And if you thought that was unique, get this. Loktak is also home to the Keibul Lamjao National Park. You guessed it, the only floating national park on the entire planet. It's a huge 40 square kilometer phumdi that's a sanctuary for wildlife, and it actually moves with the seasons across the lake. So where is this unbelievable place? Well, we're in the state of Manipur, tucked away in the northeastern corner of India. Loktak Lake is right there in a valley, this huge expanse of fresh water that's really considered the lifeline for the whole state. All right, so here's the plan. We're going to explore this incredible floating world, but we're also going to uncover a pretty tough story of crisis. We'll start with its amazing ecosystem, then we'll look at how its lifeline is fraying, the very real human cost, the wider conflict that's engulfing the region, and finally, what all this means for a very uncertain future. Okay, first, let's just really appreciate how special this place is. This isn't just some local marvel, it's a site that's recognized as being important for the entire globe. I mean, look at this list. Loktak has some seriously impressive credentials. It's the biggest freshwater lake in the whole region. That floating park we just mentioned, it's the last natural home for the endangered Sangai deer, which is actually Manipur's state animal. And because of all this unique life, it's been designated a Ramsar wetland of international importance. That's a big deal. But, and you knew there was a but coming, this natural wonder is in deep, deep trouble. For decades, human intervention and pollution have been pushing its really delicate ecosystem right to the breaking point. The very lifeline of Manipur is fraying before our eyes. So how did we get here? Well, this timeline points to a really critical moment. Back in 1983, a dam called the Ithai Barrage was built for hydropower. And that one structure completely changed the lake. It blocked its natural rhythm, its seasonal drainage, the very pulse that kept it healthy. And just 10 years later, the damage was already so bad that Loktak was put on something called the Montreux Record. That's basically a global watch list for wetlands that are in danger. And you don't have to take the scientists' word for it. Just ask the people who know the lake best. When researchers asked the local fisherfolk what the biggest threats are, their answers were crystal clear. Their number one concern, the out-of-control spread of the phumdis, which are literally choking the lake. And right behind that, the disappearance of fish and just terrible water pollution. So here's the bottom line. That dam, the Ithai Barrage, kicked off a whole cascade of problems. By keeping the water level high all year round, it stopped the phumdus from doing what they're supposed to do, sink in the dry season and get nutrients from the lake bed, so they just grow and grow. On top of that, you've got pollution from rivers, deforestation, pesticides, all pouring into what's become a stagnant system, poisoning the water and killing off the fish. An ecological crisis is always a human crisis. And for the thousands of people who've lived on and around Loktak for generations, well, the degradation of the lake means the collapse of their entire world. Just think about that number for a second. Over 50,000 people. Their main source of food, their income, it all comes directly from a lake that is getting sicker and sicker. When the fish vanish and the water gets polluted, their lifeline is cut. Simple as that. So as their traditional way of life fails, they're forced to make some pretty desperate choices. A recent study actually broke it down into these three paths they take. Some try job transformation, which basically means working way harder for fewer and fewer fish. Others try job diversification, picking up some part-time work nearby. But for a growing number, the only real option left is migration. And this chart shows where they end up. When these skilled fishers and farmers have to leave and go to cities like the state capital, Imphal, look at this. Nearly half of them end up as construction laborers. A quarter finds some sort of regular wage job, but you're seeing people go from being self-sufficient providers to being unskilled workers in a totally new world. This quote, it just captures the harsh reality of it all. A traditional, respected way of life, something so deeply connected to this unique place, is being traded for pulling rickshaws and scrambling for odd jobs in the city. And it's all because the ecosystem back home is collapsing. But the story of Loktak Lake doesn't exist in a bubble. To really get what's happening, you have to zoom out and look at the deeply troubled landscape of Manipur itself, which right now is caught in the middle of a violent ethnic conflict. At the heart of it all are two communities. You have the Meitei, who are the majority in Manipur and mostly live in the Central Valley. That's where Loktak is. Then you have the Kuki, who are one of the minority tribal groups, living mainly in the hills around the valley. Tensions basically exploded after a court ruling gave the Meitei scheduled tribe status. Now this is a big deal because it allows them to buy land in the hills, which the Kuki fear will lead to them losing their ancestral lands and could threaten their entire identity.
The result has been absolutely catastrophic. Since the violence really erupted, more than 60,000 people have been forced to flee their homes. The state has been pretty much split down ethnic lines, with a buffer zone separating the Métis-controlled valley from the Kuki-controlled hills.
And you have to remember, this is all layered on top of a decades-long armed insurgency that involves multiple militant groups. The situation got so unstable that the central government had to step in and impose what's called president's rule, dissolving the state government and taking direct control. That's a huge red flag that governance has completely broken down. So what you end up with is not one crisis, but three, and they are deeply and dangerously tangled up with each other. The future of Loktak Lake is completely tied to the future of the society that surrounds it. It creates this awful, vicious cycle. So, step 1, the lake's decline destroys people's livelihoods. Step 2, that economic desperation makes social tensions even worse. Step 3, those grievances get sucked into the wider, violent ethnic conflict. And finally, step 4, with society at war with itself, any hope for a big, coordinated effort to actually save the lake becomes almost impossible. Now, there have been some efforts. Recently, authorities cleared over 50 hectares of that suffocating phumdi overgrowth, and that's good, it's a positive step. But it's kind of like treating a symptom while completely ignoring the disease. The root causes, that dam, the constant pollution, the deep-seated social conflict, they all remain completely untouched. And that really leaves us with the central, haunting question here. For a place as unique and as fragile as Loktak Lake, a place where nature and humanity are so completely intertwined, how can you possibly heal an ecosystem when the human society that depends on it is tearing itself apart?